Courageous Conversations, as today we'll talk on racism, police shootings, communities of color, and the church. And as I mentioned regarding courageous conversations, we're going to have exactly that. We're going to sit down as you see us here and have a conversation that requires courage. The topics that we will discuss tonight are very sensitive topics. Many have different ideas, many different mindsets, and even many different experiences regarding the many topics we'll talk about tonight. But what we're asking everyone to do is let's just listen. Let's sit down and talk, and let's listen, and let's listen intently. Let's not just listen for our point of view, but let's listen to all sides. Let's listen to truth. And the goal of tonight is for Jesus to be glorified. We know that Jesus is the answer to all that we experience, that he gives us power to love. He gives us power to serve one another. So we want Jesus to be glorified tonight. And I want to begin by introducing Richard Lawhead. He is a retired captain of 31 years total of law enforcement experience. So he's going to be another wonderful wealth of knowledge for us tonight. And then we have Terrence Stone. He's the CEO of Young Visionaries. I'm looking forward to hearing your perspective on where we are today in this world. And thanks all of you for tuning in. If you're on Facebook or YouTube watching us, feel free to ask some questions. And if you are going to ask questions in your post, let us know who the question is for. And if you can keep your questions really succinct to the point, that would be great. So let's just begin to have our courageous conversation. I'm excited to hear from both of you men what you think about some of the issues that are going on today. So since you're a former officer, and also former Marine, which is a hoorah, I want to start with you. So Richard, what can you tell us just from your perspective of 31 years? The life of a police officer, you clock in, what happens from there?
Well, obviously, the job of a police officer has changed in the 31 years or so that I've been involved in law enforcement. Like we talked a little earlier, when I started this job, we were issued a baton, a gun, a bullets, a pair of handcuffs, and a few things, and we hit the street. Today, through obviously the change and evolving of law enforcement and adjusting to situations that continue to happen, that kind of thing, we've now evolved to an officer goes 10-8 or in service every day. He's carrying a body camera, probably a tape recorder. He's got a taser. He's got a rubber bullet gun. He's got a regular shotgun. He's got a beanbag shotgun. He's got a million different tools at his fingertips, and he still has to decide, sometimes in a matter of seconds, which one to deploy. And whichever one he deploys, if it's deployed wrong, he's going to be scrutinized for the next X amount of time on why he didn't do something else. And what a lot of people forget, and some of it is law enforcement's fault, is that we're all human. Cops are human. I don't care how we are trained to be unhuman because of the things we see and the things we have to face. We may start our day off with a dead baby and go immediately to a bank robbery, or go immediately to a domestic, or wherever we're going to go. Nobody knows before we went to that call that's being scrutinized what we went through that day or that week, or what we got going on at home. We're just like anybody else. We have wives, we have kids that are in school, we have kids that are fighting things, we have all the domestic issues that anybody else faces, but yet we have to put on a face. And then, I use the example frequently that nobody likes, when we were in school, nobody liked the playground monitor. We couldn't kick the ball that hard, we couldn't run that fast, we couldn't play tetherball like that. All the things we wanted to do, we couldn't do. So all of us waited till she had her back to, we're just big playground monitors today. We don't make the rules. A lot of times we don't necessarily agree with the rules, but those are the rules in law, and we have to enforce them. And it's a very difficult job. It's the hardest job in the world to get. And it's the easiest job in the world to lose. Everybody says, well, I would love for everybody in the community I worked in, how come we don't hire from within the community? I would love to hire from within the community. But it's such a tough job to get. We'll get, comparing to firemen, firemen, you got to fight to get that job. Nobody, but a cop, we'll have 500 people show up for an interview. They fill out the application, they go to the interview. By the end of that first round, we may end up with, if we're lucky, on a really good day, we'll end up with 10 candidates out of that pool that we can move on.
Wow.
That's how hard it is. You got to pass a polygraph, which is a lie detector. You got to get past a medical, and you got to get past a background. And everything you've said or done up until the time you're 21 is going to be scrutinized. So today, we have kids that said stupid things when they were in high school on Facebook. It's probably going to get them DQ'd today. Some of the things that you have to, it's so difficult. We want the person to have all these different tools, but if they experience too many things, then they can't be a cop. They gotta be, it's very difficult to get this job. It's just, I still truly believe, even with everything that's going on today, it is the best job in the world to have.
Wow.
I love it. I always loved my job. That's probably why I spent so much time doing it. And I urge anybody that wants to be a police officer, go do it if that's what you want to do. It's a very difficult job to do, but it also has a number of great rewards. I've had a lot of great experiences in my career. I learned a lot, and I think that. I just think it's a great career. It's got its problems.
Sure.
We, millions of cops out there, and we get our bad apples just like any other organization or profession.
And that's a wonderful segue. So I'll ask Terrence first, and I'll come back to you. So before...
It would have been better if you talked to him first.
Because he did say a lot of stuff. I was like, I'm going to eat you up with that one right there. I was like,
he knows too much about me. You should have probably let him talk first.
Like, oh, my goodness.
So as we can...
digging your own hole.
As we continue this courageous conversation, so we talked a little bit before we went live. So regarding the camel that broke the straw that broke the camel's back with George Floyd. So what were your initial thoughts when you saw that happen?
Oh, that was terrifying and heartbreaking at the same time. Because you have sworn law enforcement officers, and like Rich was saying earlier, they have so many different tools that they can use to apprehend or arrest someone, basically. I don't know if the knee was one of them, but they have the taser. He said that, they have the mace, they have, the rubber bullets, and things like that are non-lethal, so just being, speaking specifically for African American males, to see that, and George Floyd, he wasn't I'm 5'6", I'm thinking he was like 6 foot something or something like that, and so he was a big guy, but to see someone like that, and with I think it was 4 officers with their knees on him, until he died, that was a terrifying event for black people, but also an event where we have to do something now, or we have to say something. Something has to be done about the brutality that we see in the community, or that we feel in the community a lot of times, because of cell phones and body cameras and things like that. Now, mainstream society, so to speak, that means white people, can see like what we see on a daily basis. Because when you're in an inner city community, it's nothing new to have a law enforcement officer come through there, and put hands on you, or harass you or ask you questions for, just because you're standing there. Now, they probably have a reason, right? We probably don't know that. A lady called 2 days ago, said guys were congregating in front of her yard. Well, my grandmother lives 2 doors down. Okay. So if we're on this street, basically. So it's all different types of reasons. But with Mr. Floyd, there's something like that. That's just trust me, it's terrifying and heartbreaking at the same time. You can't even imagine, just to be him on the ground for 8 minutes. Now, if you can't really reflect how long 8 minutes is, hold your breath for 8 minutes, just to try to get in perspective how long this man had his knee on his neck, and he's let him know that I can't. The guy called for his mother. You know what I mean? That's how terrifying he was. Basically, this is a grown man, but one of his last dying words was "Mama," and that's just heartbreaking within itself.
So from a law enforcement perspective, how does one explain? Obviously, we don't have the incident that led up to it, but the actual 8 minutes. So how do, from a law enforcement perspective, what does your lens look like?
Well, there's no way to defend. We don't have all the facts, but there's still no way to defend what happened. There's other officers there. I've been in situations where we've had to, somebody say, hey, calm down, he's in custody, calm down. There was things leading up to that. Why somebody didn't do something, there's just no excuse. There really just isn't any excuse. I don't know all the facts that led up to that, and it's hard. And we live in a society where we have a judicial system and everything else, where all the facts can come out, and But I find it hard to believe that there's going to be a way to defend that action, I think that at the end of the day, that guy should have been dealt with. Obviously there's a problem.
Yes.
He should have been dealt with. I'm not sure what his background is. I'm not sure. I've only heard rumors, and I think a lot of us have only heard rumors. I don't know what his personnel file looks like. I don't know who he is. I've heard rumors that these two knew each other. Maybe there's been instances where these two have met before. I don't know. And it's hard for me to, I can say there's no excuse, but it's hard for me to sit here and totally judge him until I see all the facts involved.
What I have read is that there was several complaints in the past.
17
yeah. Complaints. So how does that work from a law enforcement standpoint? If there's complaints against you from citizens, is that individual sat down? Is it investigated, or is it just, hey, do better next time?
Well, I can only speak for, really California law enforcement, and every state is different. And really, most agencies are different on how serious they take things. I can tell you in our organization, especially today, we take it very seriously. And every complaint that comes in is investigated. Nothing ever gets kicked down the road. And, today, most everything is usually recorded or on body camera, or there's, we get a number of complaints that we can immediately exonerate on body camera footage. We've actually been able to take care of complaints. We've had a complaint where sometimes a mother and father will come in, or a lot of times a mother will come in with her son and say, well, this is what happened. And we say, well, here, all the parties are involved are here. We'll show you the body camera footage. And here's the body camera footage. And they have a totally different perspective when they leave. But I'll tell you that, we look at every single complaint that comes in. When we have a complaint, it's investigated. We have, when I left our organization, we had 3 detectives, a sergeant, and a lieutenant that are assigned to internal affairs. Internal affairs, they have their own private office upstairs. They're secluded from the rest of the department, basically. And all they do all day is basically investigate internal complaints on officers. And
they work for the police department?
Yes, they do work for the police department, and I think that there's always that distrust in some things where they want an outside entity to have some input, or an outside entity. We do have a police commission. They don't necessarily look at all our complaints. They do have some input, but
I think even just in saying, that's a conversation. Forgive me for butting in.
You're fine.
But just with that, like you said, we have an internal affairs department. They work for the PD, but then, you know, their office is just upstairs, basically. So that's like, you know, I'm just trying to picture that as far as, you know, because, you know, we all work for the same place, basically. So they still have to walk to that building and probably after work. We're going to have a beer with you guys. Everything is cool. We're going to barbecue. You know my kids. I know your kids. So when, you know, so it really needs a whole outside entity to really look into that, because I don't, like me just hearing that, I really can't have trust in a situation or a system like that. You know what I mean? That's like if I do something and you ask my little brother, did he do it? He gonna say no immediately. You know what I mean? He gonna say no because he got to deal with me later. You know, so it's almost that same concept, and I think that's one of the things that's broken, and it's wrong with the system, as far as just, you know, just an oversight like that as well.
Well, I think there's oversight. You know, when you say, you know, hey, we got to walk down, we got to have beer with these guys, we got to get dressed in the same locker room.
Yeah.
Sure, we all know each other, no doubt about it. But that investigation, facts are facts. You're gonna have an interview with the suspect or the complainant.
Mm-hmm.
You're gonna have an interview with the officer. You're gonna have interview with any witnesses. You're gonna have maybe body camera footage, maybe not.
Mm-hmm.
And there's really no chance of sweeping anything under the carpet. There just isn't. It's ultimately going to be reviewed after it leaves that, let's say that detective is his friend, it's going to leave him and go to the sergeant. The sergeant's going to review that case, and then he's going to sign it off. Once that leaves him, it's going to go to a lieutenant and be signed off. Ultimately, it's going to go to the chief of police. Ultimately, he's going to look at each one of those complaints.
How long have they been in existence, this system right here with the what do they call it again? The investigator guys.
Internal affairs?
Internal affairs. How at the department that you were with, how long have they been in existence and in that same building?
Well, they've always been in that building as long as I've worked there, so.
So you can say, we're safe to say close to 30 years.
Yeah, sure.
Fantastic.
But they're different people, but.
Well, just that department.
Sure.
How many convictions have they did in 30 years? That's like almost.
Lots.
Convictions of police officers.
Yeah, you talking about criminal convictions, or are you talking about?
I'm talking about internal affairs. So convictions as far as, okay, we have a complaint, it went up to internal affairs. Now, how many people or how many officers have they really held to the fire? Oh, in 30 years. Like
I can tell you a ton. When you go into the police station, you look at academy pictures of academy classes that have graduated. You look at those pictures and you go, that guy's not here, that guy's not here, that guy's not here. So many guys in my career.
Based on the internal affairs?
Internal affairs investigations, they are fired, they are released. They you know, guys are fired. I mean, I see guys here in town that I worked with at one time that were fired during their career.
How many complaints do they get a year, you think?
I don't know the number of complaints, but I know there's a lot of complaints.
Estimate a lot to me is like 10 people in one room. Like, so estimate how many, I'm just trying to get it.
I don't have the statistics for how many actual complaints we get a year, but I will tell you that there's a number of complaints that come in on a daily basis for officers. And each one of those is investigated. And a number of officers are fired on a regular basis. I mean, it just, I can.
How many internal affairs officers are there?
Well, when I left, there was 3 detectives, a sergeant, and a lieutenant, and then a captain ultimately over the whole division.
So about 5 or 6, and then so I'm trying, because you said I'm just trying to rationalize this in my brain and in my system right now, because it likes to me, it's like the lack of counselors we have in the school. Basically, you have average school, you have about 400 to 500 kids, and like 4 counselors in charge of 400 and 500 kids, basically. So even if they see a kid it's almost impossible probably to see a kid every day, or maybe not, but to see a kid, but then deal with all of their situations and problems, it kind of puts me in a situation, in a state of mind that it can be like the same thing. So probably some things are just being pushed to the sides or things like that. Or if there's a counselor at a school and he's really dealing with situations because this kid is a problem kid, basically. You know what I mean? So this kid is always popping up on the radar. I know principals that, you know, they know specific names of specific kids because that kid is always sitting on a chair in his office. So I'm thinking like even the department or any police department probably would have that same situation basically. So if you have like, for instance, the guy with the knee on George Floyd's neck, I think he had 17 to 22 prior complaints basically, you know. So that means he's been in a principal's office 17 to 22 times, you know. So that principal, whoever is in charge of that guy, knows this guy is a problem child right here, you know. But they never did anything about it. So I don't know if their internal affairs department is inside with them or they have an outside entity, you know. But still, it's like the community can't trust a system like that to regulate itself, basically. You know what I mean?
I agree. I can't speak for that agency, and I don't know what the 17 complaints were.
Yeah.
You know, a complaint can be anything from the officer cussed me to the officer hit me or the officer did something else. You know, I can tell you that, like we talked a little bit before, is how we do our uses of force. Today,
Right.
anything above the use of empty hand techniques, which is like, you know, hey, you pull away from me, I put you in a control hold and put a pair of handcuffs on you. If I have to do anything more than that, that's considered a use of force. Now that every one of those is investigated in our organization.
Right.
Again, I can't speak for every organization.
Yeah.
We found it in California that, you know, we need to do that. And that's one way to show that, hey, we have accountability for our officers, is we are going to look at every use of force. We're going to look at everyone and immediately look at it. So the officer calls you and says, hey, I hit this guy with my baton 3 times. Okay, I want, you know, we have the body camera footage, hopefully. That's what we're supposed to have if he's wearing a body camera at the time. We immediately take the officer's statement, then the sergeant is sent to investigate. He talks to the suspect out of the earshot, usually of the officer, gets his statement, if the suspect will give us a statement. Then that suspect goes immediately to the hospital, where he's checked by a doctor before he's booked, because we're going to check everything, even if there's no complaint of pain. We used force. We're going to document it. We call one of our ID techs. They come out to the hospital. They photograph the injuries. If we see 5 red marks and he says I only hit him 3 times, we got a problem.
Yeah.
And those things better match up. Now, after they leave there, they go to the jail to be booked. When they get to the jail to be booked, they're screened again by a jail nurse. Now, the jail nurse decides whether they're ready to come into the facility or not. If she sees something the doctor didn't see, she goes back to the jail, because they're not going to be responsible in the facility for them. So they're scrutinized again. So there's like, you know, and everything that happens in the jail is videotaped again and recorded and documented and everything else in an effort to show the public that we have accountability. Now, we're not able always to show all that stuff, but that stuff exists and eventually comes out, usually in a court or anything else. Yeah. But I'm telling you that stuff is heavily, heavily scrutinized. I think the police department needs to do a better job, and I think you and I, in meeting with their community, right, and interacting with their community more, so we can have people in the community that have credibility in the community that can come into the police department, look at what we're doing, and go back to the community and report. We can't have everybody in the community in the police department looking at everything that's going on in the police department, but we should have those designated people that come in. You know, you and I developed a relationship over 20 years ago.
Right.
And we have a different kind of, you know, we can have an open conversation, and I invited you many times into the police department to see how we do things. And you know, I don't always do things the way other cops do things, but I am all about getting the community and the police department on the same page.
Yeah, and transparency.
I totally agree.
Yeah.
Regarding transparency, do you think it's the media that muddies the water, or is it not having relationships between the police officers and communities of color?
Both.
Yeah, both. I think it's both. You know, because the media most definitely, you know, they want to sell that story, but they can only sell that story if something happened, though, as well, too. True. Yeah. So, or if it happened, you know, so then we can look at it in any way that we want to look at it, or make our own assumptions of based off the information that we receive, either through through the media or however we receive the information, through social media or whatever. But I think both kind of muddies that water.
Okay. I was talking to Rich earlier this week, and I was going to ask him about this story. It's slide 2, Brother Craig. It says 3 Wilmington, North Carolina police fired after planning mass murder against black people. Quote, it says, we are just going to go out and start slaughtering them. Use the word niggers. I can't wait. God, I can't wait. So when things like this is recorded, and then it goes out via the media, it further causes how can communities of color trust police officers when they have mace, bullets, batons, obviously a gun, authority. So they roll up onto a scene in the black community or community of color, having this type of attitude or this type of mindset. So how does communities of color, how do we navigate knowing that there are some bad apples that do have these feelings, but what happens when stuff like this isn't caught on a camera or caught on audio, but they're just here now to not necessarily help?
There's no room today for any of that in law enforcement, nor do I think that there should have ever been any room for any of that in law enforcement. It shouldn't be there, that we shouldn't, hopefully our hiring processes screen out that crap. Because I will tell you that I can't even, I rode around in a police car for 31 years, and I was very active on the street. I rode a motorcycle for about 10 to 15 years of my career as well. I have never, ever sat in a police car, even whether I was working with the gang unit, or whether I was working traffic, whether I was working with the narcotics unit. Did I ever once hear somebody, or did I have an officer in the car say, let's go get that guy because he's black, or let's go get that guy because he's Hispanic? There were a lot of other things that we stopped people for, but I never witnessed it. Now, does it happen? Yes, and that's proof. On a hot mic, somebody saying something like that. But I can honestly say I never saw it in my agency.
That's 31 years.
And as much as I said in the beginning, we're human, and as much as we're judged, just as much as you don't want to be judged by the color of your skin, I don't want to be judged by the uniform I wear. There's bad apples. We got bad apples, and I'm sure you got a lot of people that you've heard of saying things that you don't believe in. That's not you. You don't believe in it. That guy looks like you, but he's not you, and he doesn't believe the way you believe. Well, there are guys that wear this uniform or wore my uniform that I'm not happy wore my uniform. Well, hopefully, we have a system that is weeding those people out. I think that our hiring processes have changed so much in an effort to get quality candidates. We're trying to weed those people out. Do we still have work to do? Yes. But I don't think the community, I really think this really comes down to relationships. I think it really comes down to building those relationships with the community and the police department so they know what's going on and they have trust in what's going on. They don't feel like outsiders. We have so many police departments and so many police administrators that want to create a relationship in the middle of a crisis. And you have people in those communities that have been crying for help and crying for a relationship for years. And what do they get? They go, hey, we don't have time right now. We'll get to you next week. Or if you want to get a couple people together, I'll send an officer to a neighborhood watch program. We're not going into those communities. We're not finding out what's driving the distrust and finding a way to answer it. If you got a specific thing that you distrust, let's find a way to answer that. There are personnel rights that an officer has. There are personnel rights that a human being has.
Yeah.
I don't want to violate any of those, but if we can find a way around that program to where we can get you in, then get you in and answer those. Find a way to answer those questions. Find a way to develop that trust, because we cannot police your community without you. There's no way we can. Terrence can tell you that we had relationships with kids sometimes in neighborhoods that when I went in there in uniform, I could never even acknowledge that I knew those kids. I could never acknowledge that I knew them. Now, I might see them at Saturday at football or basketball or whatever we were doing, but if I acknowledged them in that community that I knew them or even gave the community a feeling I knew them, they would be ostracized from their community for what are you doing being friends with the police, you know? It just, we have to change that. We have to find a way to build that bridge and get over it. And it all comes, I think, through building trust and relationships.
You were going to say something?
Yeah, I was just told earlier he was digging that hole. But earlier you were talking about like law enforcement is one of the hardest jobs to get and one of the easiest to lose. So so I understand the background checks and the lie detector tests and things like that. So how does an officer with this mentality right here, so how does he slip through those cracks? I don't know how long they've been on the force, but he's on the force long enough to be mad and prejudiced. So how does he slip through those cracks, you know, and just you know, now he's just among us, you know, with a badge and a gun.
Well, here's how he does it, is we don't have, in California we have standardized hiring practices.
What does that mean?
Standardized. I mean, most agencies hire the same way in California, but you go outside of California, it's not that way. You know, when a guy's looking for a job as a cop, if he doesn't get hired by this guy, he goes and looks someplace else. Sometimes if he doesn't get hired in California, he goes some other state and works because he can't get past the scrutiny here.
Okay, say like if this guy was working for the same organization you was working for, or mentality of this guy right here, and it's, you know, whether this is locker room talk or whatever, who I hold responsible is the guys next to him that's not saying anything.
I
you
agree
see what I'm saying? Because, you know, it's just like when law enforcement's in the street, they say, well, these crimes are not being solved because nobody's saying anything. It's the same thing in the police department. Like nothing's, we feel like nothing's being done because the officer in the car is not saying anything. This just happened to be caught on probably body cam or something like that. But whoever he's talking to, right, and he's actually plotting murders right now. This is premeditated murders or premeditated attempted murders right now. But the guy that he's talking to, I feel like, is just as guilty. Just like if me and the pastor was in the car and I pull out a gun and said, we finna go shoot, he was like, man, that is a good idea, right? We both automatically guilty when we get caught. We both are gonna get charged for whatever happens,
Sure.
right? So with law enforcement too, I think the community is looking for that same thing, because if the guy next to him feels like, okay, well, if you do something or say something and we together and I don't say nothing, then I'm guilty with you. Now, am I ready to take on that guilty responsibility so that we can be friends after work, you know? So I think that law enforcement needs to put forth that, you know, or have some guys in there like, well, you're a good dude. I've been knowing you for 20 years.
Thanks.
He about to cry up here.
That's what we got this one. We got this.
Give him the tissue. Give him the tissue.
Preemptively ready.
But the guy next to you might not be a good guy, right? You know what I mean? But he'll be able to get in some doors and slide through because he's with you, right?
Okay,
but his heart is not in the same place.
I realize that, but you knowing me, what do you think I'd do to something like that?
I don't know. You tell me. That's just a
No.
courageous conversation.
Do you think I would allow that?
I would
type of
hope
car?
not.
Okay.
If you do, I'm
Yeah.
gonna meet you after work.
There you go.
We're gonna have words.
That's just it. I don't know how anybody like that slips through the cracks, and there's not that. There, you know, I can tell that. You know, I've had many conversations with young cops say, hey, you know, I don't want to hear you talk like that again. I don't want to, you know, never anything to that level. But I've heard them say inappropriate stuff, cuss at residents or citizens in the neighborhood, whatever. And I said, hey, I don't want to hear that stuff again. If I hear it again, you know, I'm putting something on paper. You know,
Now, would you be the exception?
No, I think it happens more than you think.
Okay.
I think that, again, we are judging a very, you know, in law enforcement, we deal with about 4% of the overall population. 96% of the people in this world want to do the right thing and are law-abiding citizen. But as far as a cop goes, we only see 4 or 5% of the population. That's all we ever see. Nobody ever calls us and says, hey, come to a birthday party. And if they did, we probably wouldn't come. We go to the birthday party after it's out of control. They call us, you know, to take enforcement action at the birthday party.
Right.
But cops don't go to fun stuff. We're not, you know, sure, Christmas, Thanksgiving, we have people bring stuff to the station, but even stuff that they bring to the station is extremely scrutinized and everything else. We don't trust anybody. because we deal with that 5% of the population all the time. It's hard. You got to go home at night and you got to disconnect. You can't watch the news. You can't do it. You got to disconnect and realize that 95% of the population is good people, but it's hard because all you see your whole work week is this. And there are not a whole bunch of us that socialize with other cops off duty. We don't spend a whole bunch of time. If you notice how much the law enforcement has evolved today, you used to be able to Adam 12, you watch Adam 12 on TV. If you saw that, if you were walking around, you could pick a cop out. I look like a cop when I walk around.
You do look like a cop.
But today, when cops are off duty, a lot of them got tattoos and everything else. You would never guess that they're a cop. They want to distance themselves from, because everybody judges them and treats them different because they are a cop. Sure. And we are different. We act different. But I will tell you that we get calloused by seeing the negative part of society, and it's perpetuated a lot by the media. If you watch the news at night, what do we see? We see about 20 bad stories about all the bad stuff happening in the country, and they close the newscast out with Johnny getting a brownie button at school. But they give you all this negative stuff and just close it out with one good feel-good story before they let you go home for the night.
I was really fast, Pastor. I just want to interject in that, because you were saying that when the cop is when he's off duty, he don't want to be be looked at as a cop. He's off duty, so he can change his clothes and things. The thing about that, vice versa, when it comes to black people, like, we can't change into anything else, basically. You know what I mean? So that 8 hours of scrutiny that you get, we get that 24 hours a day, 25 hours a day, 8 days a week, basically, based on, the community that we're in, or going outside of the community. Just, we get that, like, all the time. Like, for instance, when something happens, George Floyd, let's go back to that. It's the most recent, most popular right now. People aren't really discussing, they're discussing what the officer did to George Floyd, but then also the discussion, and we had it earlier, like the discussion as well, what did he do to get himself in that situation? You see what I'm saying? So the discussion goes back to, what did he do to get himself murdered like that? Instead of just, oh my goodness, like, that's not even practical, tactics to lean on a man's neck like that. And so I said that to say that for 8 hours you get that scrutiny, and then you can change your clothes and be whoever you want to be, But we don't have that option, basically. You know what I mean? Because after the 8 hours is up, whoever takes the next shift, we still have to worry about this person driving through our communities. It might not be with the same like mine as a rich lawhead. You see what I'm saying? I just want you to feel that empathy that people really don't feel with black folks.
And why do you think that white people don't feel the same empathy for black people?
Well, not all white folks.
Not all, yeah.
I'm not speaking for all, y'all.
Can't say all. And
Right.
a little disclaimer.
Yeah.
So as we're having a courageous conversation, today
now I'm
we
digging
have
a hole.
today we have not said all
right.
anything. We've not said all police, all black, all white. We're just having a courageous conversation. In having this conversation, why is it that maybe some white people would view what you just said as foreign, as just do the right thing? Nothing bad will happen to you if you just, if you're a law-abiding citizen. So just you can't change your color, but.
Well, I think with that, even I think most of us get our information from news media sources and things like that. So even just some of the shootings, for charges to my head, not my heart. So I'm trying to remember the young lady's name. She got shot because the police department came into the wrong apartment.
I think it's Breonna.
Help me out. We
Breonna
looking embarrassed. We
Taylor,
both
I
black
believe.
and came.
There's so many. I think it's Breonna.
Yeah.
I think it's Breonna
Yeah.
Taylor.
And
I
then
believe.
so just situations like that. So that I haven't heard of that happening in a white community with white people, that the police bust in the wrong door, and you know, and and her boyfriend starts to defend what's happening, or even the other incident where the off-duty law enforcement officer walks into the wrong apartment.
Right.
This ain't even your furniture, right? But still kills this guy because she thinks he's in you know. Other races don't get that. Like, I feel like even just we were talking about being pulled over earlier, and you know, when black people, when we get pulled over, the tension level is just that much higher, even if we didn't do anything, basically, or we feel like we didn't do anything, or we feel like we spared a little bit, basically. Like the reactions from law enforcement, because they go from 0 to 10 immediately, you know, 0 to 10 immediately, and I don't think everyone gets that same reaction as us, you know, in the car. Even if you turn off the engine, you got your hands where you can see them, you know, you roll down all the windows, ain't nobody in here, would pop the trunk, you can look in there if you want to too, you know, but we don't get that same courtesy, you know, as other nationalities when we're interacting with law enforcement. So I don't even know if that's in the training. Like, okay, you can practice shooting at black people, or these are the tactic tools, but you can only use this on black, because we don't get that same courtesy as other nationalities when we encounter law enforcement. Basically, not all the time.
Well, I think one of the things that you talked about there, you dug a pretty big hole yourself, but I think
I'm trying to help you out.
One of the big things that you talked about is that you don't hear about the wrong door we kicked to a white home. You don't hear about the officer that's involved in the shooting. It's not reportable because it doesn't sell, Terrence. It doesn't sell. So you're not getting fair reporting on that. And, you know, when I think that, you know, it's sad. I don't know how to change people's perception, and I don't know how to change what's inside of you and what fears you have. I have some of those fears, and, you know, we all have fears. We should have. If we're human, we should have fears. You know, a lot of times there's, you know, you hit on it just a little bit earlier. You said, we got a call, those guys were hanging out in front of that house, even though you're there visiting your grandma lives 2 doors down. But we still got to answer that call. You know, when that neighbor calls and says, hey, I got a black guy out in front of my house. He don't fit this neighborhood. I need you to come talk to him. I don't know why he's here. Well, we got to answer that call. Normally, we would just like to say, lady, a black guy can walk anywhere he wants. A white guy can walk anywhere he wants. You know, what are you calling us for? Oh, no, he don't fit. Because if we don't answer that call and they go do something, then, you know, whether they're white, black, or anything, they call and say somebody's out in front of the house. We have to answer that call. And the first thing we're going to hear is, why are you stopping me? There's other people out here. How come you're stopping me? Well, because you're the guy I got the call on.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know how many people complained, hey, what'd you stop me for? You know, I said, hey, there was a robbery down the street. They gave us a description of a black guy wearing a blue shirt. Now, if you're not that guy, that's fine, but you are wearing a blue shirt and you are a black guy. She didn't give me any other details. I got to stop you and ask you if there's any more details. And I have to wait. When they put the radio call out, a lot of times we don't get any more detail than that, preliminarily. Now, we got detectives and everybody else rolling to the scene. Eventually, we'll get a video that says, yeah, the guy had a beard or he had something else. But initially, that's what we're sent looking for. And if you're not that person and you cooperate, you have no problem whatsoever in most cases. I can't, the rogue guy that goes off and does something he's not supposed to do, those are the guys we got to deal with. But in our effort to police the community, we have to work with the information we're given. And how do we change that? You know, we talked about implicit bias. You and I both were sent to some training on implicit bias, and we can't understand why people are biased. You know, they portray certain individuals this way in movies. They show them on the news. They do all this stuff. So the first thing that races through somebody's mind who doesn't have the real story is, oh, I got to be afraid of this guy. I got to move to the other side of the street and walk around this guy because I'm afraid of him. You know, those fears are just people's fears, and I don't know how to change that other than we have to reprogram. We have to reprogram our brains and our kids' brains and everything else to where they don't look. I mean, our kids see bad crap all the time. They see the news. They're watching the news with us sometimes. They play these video games. They do all these things that depict sometimes certain races in certain ways. I don't know why they do it.
That kind of leads into, we have a few questions that came in online, so we'll start with you, Terrence, and we'll jump back to you, Rich. This first question, or last question that we just received, it says, a mom says, I have a 9-year-old. How do I educate her to love and respect people of color? My daughter told me that she's afraid to say anything for fear of saying the wrong thing.
That's deep. I think even with that, I think just well, with the parent being nice to people of color, you know, and different people that doesn't look, because the baby is 9, that's a baby, so she's gonna react and do things based off your reactions and the way that you treat people. So I think that you should educate her in the home, and just teach her how to treat all people equally, basically. And if she has questions, she say, well, why does this person do that, or why did that person do that? You know, just give them a sound explanation of why. But that has to happen in the home, and that kid is only going to react based on how you react to certain situations.
And I like your key word, that person, not that black person or that white person or Hispanic person or Asian, that person. If that doesn't start in the home, if proper teaching doesn't start in the home, it's not going to happen at school, and definitely in the street. It's not going to happen there. Somebody asked a question earlier, Rich, for you. It says, what role does the police officers union play in firing a bad police officer?
Well, the union really doesn't have anything to do with it, other than your union dues pay for a thing called legal defense. So you're automatically, the union provides a lawyer and that kind of stuff for you. But as far as being involved, the union really has little or no say in anything that goes on with an internal affairs investigation, or any investigation, really. We're just like any other labor union, other than we provide, long-term disability and all the other things for our members, but we do provide a legal defense fund.
Okay.
And we provide counselors and all kinds of other stuff. But
and this question is for both of you. Someone said, how does or did your faith in Jesus influence your work on a daily basis?
helps you look for the good in society. You gotta know that. There's for the things that happen in this world, there's a higher power and control. Otherwise, neither one of us would be here today. But it's something to look at as the good. It's just what I see as the good in society.
Yeah, I think with me, even just career-wise, I started off as a youth minister, working with kids, and so that segued into the career that I have right now, as far as working with kids, across the county. So since that was actually my first job ever, working with kids, being a youth minister. And so now, from there to now, we work with over 50,000 kids throughout the county. So it plays a big part, even just forming an organization. We got young visionaries from Acts and Joel says our old men will have dreams, our young men will have visions, and things like that. So it's always a tremendous part and a major part of just what we do and our mentality, basically, moving forward.
Amen to that. I want to go back to the mom that asked a question to regarding her 9-year-old. I would say from a black perspective, something that I wouldn't say it bothers me, but it's a little disturbing sometimes when a story is being told by a white person and the story happens to include a black person. That'll be mentioned in the story, and it has no bearing on the story at all. So if I say, hey, me and my brother Craig went out to eat, and my black friend Terrence joined us, what bearing does Terrence being black have anything to do with we're about to eat a bunch of food? So I would say even in the small areas that we have some biases, that if we just simply say, hey, I'm going to invite my friend Terrence to go out to eat with us, that's what's most important, not that Terrence is black. And so it's just the little subtleties that we do, and how we explain things and how we tell stories that I think sometimes point back to a bigger issue. And Would you think it's correct for people to say that I don't see color? Do you want people to see color, or do you want them to see you, or how would you work that?
Yeah, they can see color, but don't think that black is bad. Basically, I think that's where the problem comes in at. So, if, for instance, going back to the kids standing in front of the house, and then and they get a call, like I see these suspicious or black guys standing in front of this house. I think that even that will make a difference on how law enforcement will respond to that situation. And I really think that and if they say, okay, we have there's two white guys standing over here, but I don't know them, or if they say there's two black guys standing in front of this house and I don't know them, they'll send more squad cars for those two black guys than they do for those two white guys, basically, And sometimes, and what I've seen and experienced, the response is more aggressive, basically. You know what I mean? Guns drawn, skirt coming in, at full speed and things like that. Like, we just don't get that type of treatment, and we know we don't get that type of treatment or that courtesy that from law enforcement, because we're talking about law enforcement, try to keep it in context, that other nationalities get, basically. Depending on the neighborhood. If you go into a low-income Caucasian neighborhood, that response might be that aggressive, or if you go into a low-income Latino neighborhood, because I think they get a lot of the bad raps that we get as well too, and I know that just like cops are not bad, all Latinos are not bad, and all blacks are not bad. All of us got a few bad folks, but a lot of times we get lumped into that. But when those bad folks collide, even with the good folks, bad stuff happens.
Sure.
And things.
Do you think, this is for both of you, do you think seeing, what's interesting about the current riots is that previous riots, it was mostly just black folks. It was just, rioting, burning stuff down. You see today, there's a lot of white people throwing bricks, spray painting, breaking stuff. But do you both of you think seeing black people loot and burn, does that go to continue the mindset that all of us are like that? Or is there a way to watch TV for 8 hours and see people of color breaking and looting, but then see a Terrence Stone, that's the CEO of Young Visionaries, and look at you different than what they've seen on TV?
No, well, like you said, first of all, it wasn't just us looting and rioting. We didn't even start it. Because I was out there, some of them, I was like, for San Bernardino, for instance, I was at the protest in San Bernardino, and when they first gathered, the majority of the crowd, and I know most people in that area. Like, I didn't even know these people. I was like, where y'all guys come from, and these were kids, with skateboards and, came from outside of the area. And the way that our streets are in San Bernardino, was no way you're gonna drive all around this city on a skateboard. So those skateboards were for blocking and hitting, basically. So even with that, so to look at, and they left at a certain time. Those crowds left, and the local citizens were there because the stuff had already happened. So they're just going in the stores, not making excuses, but this is what happened. So to look at a situation like this particular one, I think there was a more different motives behind it than just George Floyd. I think people just took advantage of that situation, basically, yes, and just start, destroying cities nationwide. Even in, I think it was in Minnesota, they caught the guy with the umbrella, and he started breaking the windows at the AutoZone or whatever store that was, and this was a white guy, and found out later that this guy was from one of the police departments out there, but he was getting the stuff started because he knew once he get it started, you break these windows, they're gonna go in there, sure, just being opportunists and things like that. So this particular one, it was more than, it was a lot of different agendas that was mixed up in there.
Well, you said, I think only the part that you said, do I see Terrence Stone as one of those when I see that do I even think no, I don't even think he's close. You know, only I know him. He's different. But I never say, hey, come meet my black friend Terrence either, though. I just,
You say my short friend.
I do
I
say
mean
you're
my
short.
short
You are
friend.
short. You know, but you know, it comes back to building relationships, and I mean, I know I beat that horse, but it does come back to that. And we do have responses like he described in neighborhoods, in certain neighborhoods, and the way we respond. And you know, we may respond to in the gardens, we may respond to a certain way because we know what's in there. We know we have had a number of problems in that, and we may respond a certain way to that location. But I think one thing that's missing is we may have responses like that in another community where we've had similar problems too. It's just, you know, what we do when we go into that community. And, you know, it's rare that you have 4 or 5 cars in the community I worked. It's rare that you have 4 or 5 cars available to go race in anywhere unless it's specialized enforcement of some sort. Every situation is different, and should be looked at as different. Every situation is different, I believe.
Do you think having more officers of color would make a difference in the community's perception of the police department?
Well, I think it helps, but even those officers are really beat up in the community. You know, they constantly hear the term Uncle Tom, or you don't really understand what's going on because you're one of them, and I know you're hiding stuff. You're not saying stuff either. When in actuality, you know, they care about their communities. You know, we've had actual guys that grew up in, you know, one of the areas in San Bernardino was Delman Heights, very heavily, and when I was a young officer, it was a very heavy gang area. It's not as heavy today, but we had a guy that worked in our department that came out of that area. And you know, he even had some problems sometimes internally because he had family and stuff in those areas, and a lot of times was seen up there in his off-duty time. People didn't understand what he was doing up there. Well, he grew up there. It's because you don't know the guy. You know, you don't get to know the guy. You don't get to find out. Even our own people sometimes we don't get to know well enough. And you know,
What I appreciate about you, Rich, I known Rich for at least 2.5 years. I met with him about 3 weeks ago. We went to a local restaurant and we sat for 2 hours, and I asked him several questions, and we had a courageous conversation before we've had a courageous conversation where I asked you, you know, several questions about police officers. How do you view black people? You know, why does this happen? So as you're talking about relationships, that it does take for somebody to actually be courageous to go sit down and talk and ask questions, and even to look on the other side of the fence and just try to understand one another. Why do you think more people don't take the time to build a relationship?
What, you talking about just people, or we still talking about the police?
Let's talk about police. We're still talking about the police.
we're talking about the police.
Well, I think even like Rich mentioned, we went to Sacramento. We had a training with community people and law enforcement on implicit bias and community policing and things like that. And also a while back, we just had conversations on like community police, and I don't think that law enforcement, I don't know why, but we don't really get a lot of community policing, and that's entails of officer actually, you know, not just coming through there, you know, when there's a problem, you know, and just start meeting the citizens and the residents of those communities. You know, for instance, if you got a kid and like I told you, when I was young, the police come, I don't care if I'm doing something or not, I'm running. I'm out of there. Jump out of the car and catch me, you know. But if, for instance, if I did run, right, and the officer is a community police and be like, all right, Terry, I'm gonna tell your mama on you, your grandmama, I'm gonna tell your grandmama when you come around, watch when you get home, you know, or you know, I'm running southbound and you know my house is down southbound. You're like, okay, I'm just go around here. When he come around the corner, I'm already at his house knocking on his door. Like I told you, you're gonna get in trouble. But community policing, I don't think, probably either on both sides, that people just don't take the time to understand like who lives in the community and who's patrolling our communities, basically. You know, I think on a good note, like we should know, our law enforcement officers, by name. Hey, how you doing, Rich? Or lawhead, or whatever you want to be called, sergeant, lieutenant, captain. Sure. And also too, same thing. Like, hey man, how's football practice? All right, man, I'm if I got time, I'm gonna see if I can get by that game. Things like that, because, and just build up those relationships. I think that
Is that possible? You think it's possible?
Yeah, I think it's possible. They stop shooting at us and beating us up, we'd be all right.
Well, I think it's possible, and the problem is the lack of personnel at times to be able to do it. Mm-hmm. I personally, I had a lieutenant that took over one of my areas one time tell me that, hey, I don't know how you did it, Rich. These people call me and tell me that you came out all the time and would meet with them and talk with them. Yeah. I don't have time to do that. I can't do that. I can't do it. Mm-hmm. It wasn't easy for me either, and it required a lot of time. And there were a few times that I would get up at 2 o'clock in the morning when I got a phone call and drive into the area to find that, hey, we just had a shooting over here. We need you to come out here. We're not getting the service we want from your staff. And I would at times roll to the scene at 2 o'clock in the morning. Yeah. That got me big chips in the bank for the community. When they wanted something, they knew that I was going to come, and I didn't hide. Every community meeting I went, I still do it. I put my cell phone number up on the phone on the board and say, hey, you can call my cell phone anytime you want, and that is my personal cell phone. You can call it anytime you want. If you turn out to be a nut, I'll use technology to block you. That's all. I mean, if you ruin that form of communication by calling me with stuff that has nothing to do, well, then I'm going to close that off. But it takes work. It's hard work. Sometimes it only takes 10 minutes, but you may want to go home. You may have a soccer game to go to or something, but it takes time. You're going to have to take that 10 minutes, 15 minutes, and go meet with those people in their environment where they're comfortable, because it's their community, and they want to be policed the way they want to be policed, not the way you think you want to police them.
So do you think the community plays a big role in policing?
It has to. We can't police the community without the community's help. We can't. There's no way. I don't know what goes on. I don't live in that community, so unless that community's open with me and tells me what goes on, I don't know when I roll in there, I don't know. Now, when I drive down my street, I know what cars fit. If I drive down your street, I wouldn't know unless you told me that car don't belong.
Yeah. No, around 2009 or so, something like that, I got with Lawhead, and I said, okay, we're going to form this. We called it a Team VIP. It was a violence intervention prevention program we did in 2009 or so. And so what Rich did, we had downtown San Bernardino. There was a university and a gym. So we would take kids there these are kids from different gang-infested neighborhoods from all across the city. We did this, I think, every weekend or every other weekend.
Every weekend.
Now this is community policing. I just want to put in context. And so we would go pick the kids up. Me and my staff would go pick all these kids up, at least 20 kids or so. And so, and with these young people, the college would let us use the gym. There was a restaurant connected to the gym. And so we would play football, basketball, lift weights, and just hang out with kids for some hours, basically. Now we have about 9 to 10 off-duty officers with us. And they regular clothes, hats backwards, and, because, out of uniform. But most of these guys had just did a shift all night, went home, or either had their clothes at the station in the car and just came straight there. I admired them for that.
Yes, that's great.
But they were building up relationships with these community kids, basically, that we were hanging out with. Now, these kids had no idea for the first few hours that these was like law enforcement. They thought they was just some old dudes hanging out with them that day.
Why they got to be old dudes?
They was some old dudes. I'm not going to say their name on camera. But so then afterwards, the department, they would buy out the restaurant, right? And so when they did that, so everyone had lunch. So we sit around this big table like this, and now introductions, right? So now we're sitting around the table, and and guys like, okay, I'm Jerome, and and then I'm Officer such and such. They looking like, what the heck, but we've already been hanging out, and these kids will return every week, either new kids or the same kids. We had repeat offenders, so to speak, so they would come every week. Then we had kids that, that this is their first time. But that community policing, because we done hung out for hours, and now we're breaking bread, and we played football and sweated together, and, and so now, like when Rich was mentioning earlier, he said, so when he go into this neighborhood, because I tell him, I said, look, these kids got to live over here. So when you drive through there, don't be like, hey, what's up, Jerome? Remember, because their people is not going to understand that relationship yet.
Sure.
Right. So we have to build that up, so and plus they'll be ostracized, just like, in other instances where PD would, depending on what they're doing though too. But the key thing is that back then we were building up great relationships with law enforcement and community kids, right? So now, and I tell them, just give them a head nod, but don't talk to him, So that's for Rich. He's just being there like, like I see him, but I know sometimes they probably like, man, I want to go see, how this kid is doing, but because we don't have those relationships like that in the community, it's hard for, and two, if you don't know everybody, like you're the only one he know. Like, how come he only know you? So that's that community policing. He has to get out the car sometimes, and just introduce himself and like, hey, what's happening, and just be more human. He said it a few times just this afternoon. Police officers are human too. And we like, okay, well, when you on the clock, act like it then, and act like we're human too. So then we all can be human today, and we all can live through the day and just be human beings, basically.
Amen to that. Amen to that. A couple of shotgun questions. We'll start with you, Rich. Defunding the police, a good idea or a bad idea?
It is a bad idea. It's you don't, once you take down that barrier of having law enforcement, you have anarchy. And nobody wants anarchy. I know they don't want anarchy. I know that there's, they don't like what happened. At whatever instance, we can talk of a number of different instances. There's people that don't like what happened, but defunding the police department doesn't solve the problem. Now we have no intermediary in a serious situation or in any situation. Your house gets broken into, who do you call? If you have your car stolen, you have anything else, again, who do you call? Once you defund the police, what is going to be, I'm sad I hear that they're going to, I see where some community socialists could help. Send a social worker to a call. We've done that for years. We've had one assigned to the PD. But sending social workers to a domestic that quickly gets out of control and has a problem, what are you going to do? What are you going to do now when we get a couple social workers that get killed? In the heat of the moment, what's sad is, we do have a lot of young officers that really haven't experienced life yet. We call in the middle of the night because we have a call out and we need, officers to come in. And there's been instances where, as a watch commander, you call the guy and you get his mother. You realize the guy's living at home. Well, here we've got a guy that we're sending to calls every day who lives at home. He's never experienced maybe not being able to pay the mortgage. He's never experienced having a father out of work probably, or not being able to pay the bills, or all the other experiences that you're going to have to go and face as an officer. When you go to the house and they're arguing because he just blew all the money at a local bar or something, you have no experience with that. What do you tell the guy? When you haven't experienced any of that stuff in life? That's why, the older we get, the better we are. Terrence talked about wiser. You got some wisdom because you've been down that road, but when you don't have that wisdom and you show up and you try to resolve something, it's going to be a chaotic situation. I don't, if they defund the police, it's going to be very short-lived. I think that, I don't think we want to go the other direction where we have residents who have no training, who have nothing, all of a sudden decide they're going to take the law into their own hands because they waited long enough and they're not waiting anymore and they start shooting people. We will have some anarchy like that, and I don't know if you know what's going on in the state of California right now. You go try to buy a gun right now, they can't keep them. They can't keep them in the store right now. So there's a lot of guns floating around out there. There's a lot of things that could potentially happen. You take that barrier away and you put law enforcement in the actual hands of the community to enforce their own laws. I think we'll have, even in Seattle right now, in the area, they're starting to hand out rifles to protect their area. So it'll be pretty bad.
I think that the concept of defunding the police department, I think people take that out of context. And even just with Rich's explanation of why not to, I can tell that it's been taken out of context. So defunding the police department does not mean shutting down a whole police department, having no police department, and making that building into a rec center and things like that. It's just reallocating funding, some of the funding from the police department to community-based or social services type things, basically. So then, like for instance, like the domestic violence disputes or whatever, just other things that does not really constitute heavy law enforcement showing up to a different area. So it's not defunding and breaking down police departments and not having police. That's ludicrous. Like that I don't think that would happen at all. But it's just it's a great idea, bad marketing strategy, basically, as far as the way that they said it. So it's not defunding the police department, just reallocating some of the funds so that so they can put it into more community-based activities. For instance, Camden, the article says that the city really did abolish the police, but right up under it in small print it says, and rebuilt the department from the ground up. So that means that they, even if they restructured that whole police department and then they just start rebuilding it, these are the good officers and great officers that we need in place to be in our community. So they didn't defund or abolish a police department. They just redid it. They got all the bad people out of there and try to replace them, hopefully good people, basically. So I think that's a great idea, just bad marketing strategies as far as the word defund.
Okay. As we were talking before we started live streaming, I looked online, and statistically, police shoot more white people than they shoot black people. That's not media worthy, obviously, but
unless they shooting themselves in the leg or something. I ain't never seen that. Police shoot more white people than they do black people.
Yeah, they're shooting more white people.
It's just the amount. It's just the amount.
Hey, no. Hey, no, Roger.
Oh, okay. I was going to interact.
He doesn't have a mic.
Okay.
Doesn't have a mic. So what you were saying?
Oh, I was just interacting with the audience. He said it is true, and this is a white guy over here telling me that the police shoot more white people than black people. I haven't seen it. I don't even know too many white guys that just got shot.
Well, and
How many white people you shot, Rich?
I'm not going to say it. I'm just, let's leave that question alone.
Okay.
But I will say that it is true. We do shoot more statistically than black, but it doesn't get the media hype, Terrence. It just doesn't get the play, and we are all glued to that TV. Even, I don't watch the news at night, but when something serious happens, I'll tune in to see what's going on. But for the most part, I do not watch the news at night, and I believe about half of what I see. I believe about half of what I see on social media.
I don't even believe that statistics. I'm going to text that to me
I will text
because
it to
I
you.
can't. You know what? Know why? It's just almost, not even almost. It's impossible for me to believe that statistic just based on even just watching social media and watching a white person get arrested, or just or a black person get arrested. Like the whole situation is different. I done seen white people attack police and the police was running. In my mind, I'm thinking, shoot him right now, because he's attacking the law enforcement trying to get away. I'm like, no, do that chokehold. You know how to do something to him so he knows that y'all serious. This looks like a cartoon right now. So even just watching just interactions, it's like if I shoot a black person, I might get up. I might get off, most likely. But if I shoot this white person, I'm getting convicted for sure. So I think in that implicit bias in the back of their mind be like, okay, you lucky you ain't black, because I'd have put like 3 caps in you right now. I can't even believe that statistic. Whoever did that,
I think the
They need to
sad
put some
part
names on there.
is again, we look at a very small portion. We can't think, you can't, this is is that a U.S. statistic or a
Yeah.
That's
national?
Russia. That got to be Russia.
No,
It got to
it's,
be
uh,
Russia.
It's
But you got to remember,
Statista.com.
we're talking about a very small community. Your community that you're in and the community I'm in is a very small portion of the overall population of the U.S. So you got to figure this is all lumped in together.
That's probably Kentucky or something. I don't know where that's at.
Do you
That ain't out
think
here.
so, Rich? Would you say that it does appear that more black people are shot by police, even with what's been caught on camera? I think one recently, a man stole a taser, was running away from the police, and I think he turned. I'm not sure if he discharged the taser, but he was shot, and I believe he did. I believe he did die.
He died in
He
Atlanta.
died.
It was in Atlanta.
He did.
So obviously the media plays a big role, but what we do see, especially in communities of color, that when there is a shooting, it most likely is a white police officer shooting someone of color. So thus the mindset continues to be, how are the police there to protect and serve when we're constantly being shot or harassed, when in a different community the result would be different. For instance, I don't remember the young man that went in and he shot up the black church it was
Oh, yeah.
forgot his name. I want to say Dylan something, Roth, something like that. They'll find out back there. But so he spent some time in the prayer meeting, then he shot I think nine of them. They led him out in a bulletproof vest, and on their way to book him, I understand was a long way, but they stopped to get him, I think it was Burger King, they stopped at. Versus you have the big man that was choked out, that he died. I'm not sure if he was selling cigarettes or if it was CDs. Brown. So you have a white young man kill 9 people. He's led out of the church, bulletproof vest, taken to fast food. You have a man outside of a store selling CDs or cigarettes, whatever the case is, and he loses his life. So it seemed like there's a disproportionate rate of death or action based upon 2 different situations. That people may say, well, wait a minute, this guy just killed 9 people. Why does he have a bulletproof vest on? But if it was a black person going into a white church, if the same thing would happen, most likely that guy's not walking out alive. How do we explain the difference? Not being there, obviously. How does one kind of wrap their head around?
Well, I can't wrap my head around that either. I can't, every situation is different. I can't tell you why. I know that, if we had a serious shooting like that where we were in fear that this suspect would be harmed, we would protect him, and it wouldn't, it wouldn't make any difference whether you're black, white, whatever. It would not make a difference. Why you went to Burger King, I don't know. I don't know
I
that.
don't think that's protocol, I'm sure.
I don't know where that would be protocol unless you had, you had to go a long distance. A really long distance, and then you have to provide. There may be a policy where you have to stop and provide some. If you have a long jail ride, I can say that I worked for a sheriff's department before I worked in San Bernardino, and I made a run. My 12-hour shift, I worked for Tulare County Sheriff's Department, and my run was to come to West Valley Detention Center. It's a 4-hour drive to West Valley to pick up prisoners that were wanted in Tulare County that had found their way to Southern California. So I picked them up, and I had to drive back, and I had to stop on the way back and get something for them to eat in that driving period. So
I don't think they had a 4-hour drive though. That was just some courtesy.
Yeah, I don't. Like I said, I don't know. And
Yeah.
again, those are the things we need to change. And I think that if those things are happening, they have to change. And the only way we can change is addressing them one by one. You know, like everybody is human. People are going to do stupid things, and you can't always account for human nature. And
If I do something, you better stop and give me some Popeye's chicken.
They do have a
I mean,
phenomenal chicken sandwich.
Yeah.
By the way.
Because and I also seen another one where a young white kid, he killed 3 people, and he's on the side of the police car sitting down, handcuffed behind him, and the officer was, giving him water, feeding him water like a little hamster. But but just seeing those types of things like that, as a black person, is it's just heartbreaking. It's like we're here. We was human trafficked from Africa and brought over to this country, and I feel like that we did a phenomenal job of just being or trying to be citizens and just adding so much to the culture of America, but still, America doesn't not all y'all, but America doesn't accept us as as citizens and as people and things like that. So we're just trying our best to be the best that we can and things like that out here in this country.
The young man's name was Devin Patrick Kelly. It was a Charleston church. We've got a few minutes left, so maybe a few shotgun questions to you. So we'll start with you, Terrence, and we'll go over to you, Richard. Black Lives Matter. Do you believe in the movement?
Oh yeah, most definitely.
And why?
For one, we do matter, but I think that it's a even just the statement in the movement is a great statement, because we're not saying Black Lives Matter more than other people or other nationalities. We're just saying that we matter too, and that's it. So when people are saying like, well, all lives matter, we understand that. We just want to be part of that equation of all. Because if you're saying all lives matter, but you still don't feel like Black lives matter, then to you, really, all lives don't matter, right? So we're just trying to be part of the mattering equation, and just saying that Black lives matter as well as everyone else's lives matter.
my argument about that is I would love for us not to perpetuate the racism and make it all lives matter. Make it lives matter, period.
Right.
Because every life matters. And I'll tell you that you ask a little bit about shooting, and you ask, I will tell you that the first time that I was involved in a shooting, it was the most traumatic thing I'd ever been involved in my life. I've been through the Marine Corps. I've shot 1 million rounds at targets. I've done all kinds of things, but I'd never taken human life. And I did, and I still get a little emotional now. Yeah. But I cried all the way to the station. I had a veteran officer. After we're involved in a shooting, we go to the station, and I had a veteran officer at that time, a Hispanic guy named Carlos, told me, "Hey, you're going to be okay." And I remember the drive back to the station. "Hey, you're going to be okay. Don't worry. Everybody goes through this." I was still shaking like a leaf. I still get a little shaky in my voice thinking about it. And it was, I didn't eat, didn't eat anything. It was one of the most traumatic things I'd ever been through. And I know that human nature, it's a very difficult thing to do. And I know other officers go through that same thing, and we've had officers that have been involved in shootings and never come back to work. They just can't deal with it. It's a very difficult thing to do. And I'll tell you that I don't ever forget the address. I don't ever forget the call. I don't ever forget where I was going, where I was standing, and what happened during that call and any of the other shootings. I remember them. I remember everything. I can tell you what was happening. I can remember what the temperature was outside, what it smelled like, what was going on. I just remember it. It's, embedded in my mind.
Yeah. I appreciate that. But I don't think that when black people are yelling Black Lives Matter, I don't think we're perpetuating racism. I think we're saying that because of the racism. You know what I mean? So because if there was no racism, we would have no reason to say Black Lives Matter as well as everyone else's. You know, so because of racism and systemic racism, that gives us a reason, like we have to say something. We matter too. You know what I mean? So if that racism wasn't there and it was fair across the board, then we would have no reason to even say nothing like that, because we're saying it because we do not feel that other nationalities, not all y'all, but other nationalities feel like that we matter. I think that that mainstream America, that's my code word for white people, you know, feel like that Black people is expendable. You know what I mean? So it's easy to lock us up in mass numbers, right? Because I think the mentality of old school America is that we was not supposed to make it past slavery, you know, but we did, right? Being resilient, thinking outside of the box, things like that. I have a good friend, Dr. David Walker. He told me a story about watermelon. Now that's not even my favorite
About
fruit.
what?
Watermelon.
Oh.
That's not my favorite fruit. I don't know about you, Pastor. I like pineapples. But listen though, now this adds some, you know, so perspective. So he was saying we're gonna run out of time just because it's overtime. They not paying attention. So he said the reason why watermelon was kind of stuck to Black folks as like a stigma is because when Black people came out of slavery, our jobs was gone, even if we was working for free, right? So we started businesses. Now you can grow watermelon you can grow watermelon probably in the desert. So Black folks, they start growing and selling watermelons. And so what white folks would do, and if they see another white person with watermelon, they try to say that, okay, you know, to get the other people to stop buying watermelon from Black people, is they use it as like, oh, you buying them nigger melons, you buying watermelons from them Black people. So then people would stop buying watermelons. So then they will make funny little characters and things like that with Black people and watermelon, because but it was a tactic to try to stun our economic growth, basically, you know, and things like that in America. So I say that to say something I forgot, but let me bring it on around. So just little things like that. So we're not just saying that Black lives matter only. We're just saying Black lives matter like your life matter, right? So give us that same, you know, respect as the young kid that have killed 9 people in a church. I'm like, if you want to shoot at 9 people, come to the hood and shoot at 9 people. We shoot back, but don't go to the church, right? And then go get them something to eat. That showed us right there that white kid that shot them 9 Black people in the church, those lives didn't matter. It was more important to make sure that this kid was comfortable on his way to the police station, right? And then so when someone else is seeing that, be like, okay, they just stopped and got him something to eat. You know, but we're seeing that like he just killed 9 people. Yeah, I don't care if they were Black, Latino, white, whatever. This dude, that's a mass murderer. He just killed 9 people. One of them was a pastor. He should have been praying hard. He should have been praying with his eyes open or something. Because the thing is this, when we see things like that, and then when we say, well, Black lives, that's what we mean. Like Black lives matter too. Not just like we know all lives matter. But can we get in the equation with you guys? Can we get on the boat too? Well, I ain't getting on no more boats for white people. But can we get on the boat? Because Black lives matter just as much as your life matter. Right. You know what I mean? And that's why. So it's not, we're not spreading racism. We just want to be involved in the equality equation, basically.
Well, you know, I think just to talk, you know, we kind of spent a little bit of time going through the drive-through getting food. It is common for us, and we keep food in the police department when we talk to suspects and interview them in the interview room. We give them food all the time.
I see that on this particular first 48.
this particular place, they stopped in a drive-through, but I can tell you it's not uncommon for us to go out and get food and bring it in to somebody we're going to interview, especially homicide suspects. They're going to be talked to for a long period of time. It's going to be interviewed. You know, these guys went through a drive-through, it didn't get pictured, but we also don't get to publicize every day and show the guy we got in the interview room eating a Big Mac. You know, we do.
Not a mass murderer, though.
Well,
9 murders right there. The
we
gun's
gotta,
still
as
hot.
much as we hate it, we got to, you know how many child molesters that we interview and we talk to and we got to be nice to and everything else? We got to get a statement from them. And what do you think we feel? I mean, like I said, I've been talking the whole time about how human we are. How do you think I got to sit at a shorter table than this across and interview some guy that's been doing inappropriate things with a grandkid or something. You know, what do you think don't you think I want to reach across the table and I know you would too, especially if it was your grandkid. I mean, it would tear you up. And it tears us up because we got kids at home. You know, and we got to deal with that stuff. We got to be able to put those feelings in check as hard as it is. Do other guys do stupid things and get caught on camera? Yeah. I tell people, when I was a sergeant in brief and even as a watch commander, I used to tell guys, hey, you might as well assume, I don't care where you are, I don't care where you're having your conversation, you're being audio recorded, video recorded, everywhere you go and every time you're out, so you better act appropriately. And if you know a guy that's not acting the way he should act, it's going to come out. It's going to come out because I truly believe if they wanted to listen to our conversation, we're on YouTube right now, they could hear our conversation. I believe that anybody could listen to your conversation. It just depends on whether they want to listen to it or not.
Well,
you
I hope
know,
they're tuning in today.
There's a lot tuning in today, I'm sure. So we got we're maybe 10, 15 more minutes, and then we'll close things down. But I wanted to transition into talking about the church and the church's role. I won't say role in racism, but what role does the church play in helping to eliminate, if possible, racism? And I'll start with you, Terrence.
That's a great question. I think the church need to do what Jesus did, you know, and Jesus was to me, a community person, basically. Mm-hmm. You know, Jesus, he always, you know, you catch him walking the streets and talking to people, whether they were, you know, prostitutes or, you know, or the tax collector, which wasn't looked great on back then. Well, nowadays too. But just, you know, I think that the church really has to go out and do what Jesus did. This is a beautiful, beautiful campus, but don't get stuck to just Sunday mornings being in here and you know, and doing worship and praise and things like that. I feel like you need to be in the communities that need you on days that they need you, and that's just not one day a week, basically. So just more community outreach, more you know, giving and you know, and I think that if the church's heart is in the right place and they're out there doing what they're supposed to do in the community, just like Jesus had the 5 loaves and the fish, and it just multiplied and fed thousands of people, I think he'll do that same blessing for the church as well too.
Amen. Kind of piggybacking on that, in John chapter 4, it's a Samaritan woman meets her Messiah, and it says, so he, speaking of Jesus, came to the city of Samaria, which is called Sychar, near a plot of ground that Jacob gave to his son Joseph. Now Jacob's well was there. Jesus therefore, being wearied from his journey, he sat by the well. It was about the 6th hour, so it was the hottest part of the day. Verse 7 says, a woman of Samaria came to draw water, and Jesus said to her, give me a drink. For his disciples had gone away into the city to buy food. Then the woman of Samaria said to him, how is it that you, being a Jew, ask a drink from me, a Samaritan woman? For Jews have no dealings with Samaritans. Then Jesus answered and said to her, if you knew the gift of God and who it is who says to you, give me a drink, you would have asked him, and he would have given you living water. So Jesus had the conversation. He had a courageous conversation that Jews and Samaritans didn't get along. So Jesus bridged that gap between Jewish and Samaritans. But it's courageous. It will take that courageous conversation to put yourself out there to bring about change and also to give hope. So as a church, how do we, in your opinion, how does the church get outside the 4 walls, as you mentioned, outreach, but on a personal level? So let's say we can do as much outreach as we want, but how does on a personal level, how does this happen on a personal level with church people. So how does Richard Lawhead meet Terrence Stone on a church level that's outside of these four walls?
But you know what? I met Rich in the projects in San Bernardino. So he was doing like what the scripture said already. Rich, what's your name, man? Rich was giving out toys. It's around Christmas time in the projects, giving out toys and gift cards and $100 bills to inner city kids. No string attached. He wasn't asking no questions. If you stood in line, you would get something, you know. And just from him, just doing that, I was like, man, you know, like this is suspicious. You know, he's skinny with a Santa Claus suit on. He ain't no belly or nothing. So I'm watching him and doing this, and he was doing it. He was, you know, it was joy on his face and things like that. And so just from his outreach, basically, right? Now it was a personal outreach in a strategic targeted area where he wasn't going in there arresting and chasing around young Black and Latino kids, but giving them Christmas gifts and $100 bills and gift cards.
Do you still do
basically.
this? Sign me up, coach.
Yeah, but it's the outreach that community policing that we talked about earlier. Like, who does that? You know, and it wasn't like a whole force. It was only a handful of them. So they didn't come in there. You know, they wasn't nervous. They wasn't, you know, watch your six and all that stuff. They just went in there inside of the community center in the projects. Right now, I don't know if you've been over to the projects, but if you want to take a field trip, I can take you over there. I know everybody, you'll be safe. But for them to go in and do that, when you talk about community policing and outreach, that's that heartfelt outreach, you know, that's appreciated. So wherever you go, wherever the community is in this community right here, that you feel like, okay, this is the Samaria of our community right here. You need to go there. Like, this is a safe place right here. It's easy to hang around each other and share Bible scriptures and things like that, but go where where nobody goes, because that's why she was surprised. Like, man, what you doing over here talking to me? You know what I mean? And you know, and she was so surprised that she didn't really understand how to get the gift that he had, because nobody comes giving gifts to her like that. You know what I mean? So just getting inside of her mind, like, oh man, you not talking to me like whatever you knew. You know, I got that real water though. You know, but so if the church, all churches, and this is the perfect time to do it because it's quarantine. You can't even have large groups of people in your church. But just go out into these communities and just outreach, just talk to people. We do it all the time. I'm an outreach expert, basically. We're out in the communities, and communities that people don't necessarily go in, and you just communicate and outreach and just bring the resources. Jesus always had resources, even if it was a cup of water. That was a resource she needed at that time. So just go out there and just provide resources to the people that need the resources, and just do it, oftenly, basically.
Amen to that.
Well, as far as the church has always been a very big part of, especially not so much my adult life, but especially my childhood. My father, I learned what I'm doing and did from my father.
Because he is awesome.
My dad would, Sundays, I didn't necessarily look forward to Sundays because I had to get up at like 5 a.m. because my dad wanted to drive the church bus. He would drive the church bus, and people he would interact with during the week, he'd say, well, I'll be here at this corner at this time to pick you up for church. I want to bring you to church. And I had to get into that old Bluebird with no heater, cold, windows rattling, everything else. Well, he drove that church bus over to, we lived in outside of Sacramento, but we went to a Broderick and Bright area, which was a very low income area. And I remember people saying, what are you going, Les, what are you driving over there for? And he said, hey, these kids all need a ride to church, and I'm gonna get them to church. And we got kids we're gonna pick up, take to church. And I still remember in high school, one of the gang members that we really didn't have too many gangs when I was a kid, but this guy run with a Hispanic gang. His name was Eddie. Eddie Savalas was his name. But Eddie rode that church bus when I was a little kid. My whole entire time through high school, I was protected. Eddie Savalas wouldn't let anything happen to me. Now, he didn't go to church anymore, but I built a relationship with him a long time ago in church, and no matter who I was in high school, I was protected, and nothing had better ever happened to me. You know, I would see Eddie, talk to Eddie, say hi to Eddie. You know, and Eddie, you know, he was going the wrong direction when we left high school. I'm not sure where he's at now, but I remember that. My dad taught me that, you know, you can't teach anybody about Jesus if you're just hanging around with Christians. He said, you got to go hang around with people who don't know anything, and they go, man, how do you get what you got? And then I get a chance to talk to them. Yeah. I get a chance to tell them, here's how I got what I got, and then here, let me show you, and come to church with me. And my dad's 87 years old, and he's still doing it today.
Yeah, he is. Yes,
we go to restaurants, I don't care where we go. He embarrasses me sometimes. We'll walk out, and he says, my name's Les. I go to Calvary Chapel, Beaumont. You want to go to church with me on Sunday? You know, and I think some people think my dad's nuts, but he's not nuts, but he's hooked on Jesus. Amen. And that's been my influence my whole life. I wish everybody had that influence because I will never, you know, I always tell my dad, I just want to be half the man you are. Yeah. But that was the influence I had, and the worst word in the world that I've ever heard my dad say is crap. And he was really mad. Yeah. But I never heard him cuss. I never heard him and my mom fight. I know they had their arguments, but we never saw it as kids. My parents did make 3 mistakes. I got 3 older sisters, but other than that, they have had a perfect life. So, you know, that's been my influence, and you know, as long as I lived under their roof, I was in church every Sunday morning, every Sunday night, and every Wednesday for Bible study. That was just the rules. You live here. You don't have to live here. Once you don't live here, you don't have to do that, but as long as you live here, you're going to be in those places.
Nice.
So let's give just closing comments. So just sum up kind of maybe your heart, some things that maybe you didn't get a chance to say. If you could sum it up in a minute or two, what would it be?
First off, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to be here and just and sit down and just have conversations. You know, I think we need more conversations like these, and just with me and Rich sitting on these, we come from totally different lifestyles, basically. You know, he grew up with his dad. My dad overdosed on heroin when I was 2. You know, I grew up, you know, I run a community-based organization now, work with thousands of kids, but I grew up because of my environment. I can't even blame it on that, but I grew up in gangs and things like that. So even just sitting across from here, and you know, and even just and I consider Rich a friend. I still hit him with those hard questions because he can talk to somebody that I don't have access to, basically, and probably relay them with some knowledge and some understanding, you know, just about people that look like me, basically. So so with that, you know, just thank you for just having us here and just having this conversation. We need more of these, you know. We need to pack stadiums with people and let people sit across the table and just talk about, you know, the differences, and also talk about the similarities, because I think there'll be more similarities than differences in most people. You know, you probably have a story climbing trees. I'm like, well, I climbed, you know, rocks or whatever, you know what I mean? But we still both climbed at the same time, basically, and just sit down and just have those type of conversations. So I appreciate it and thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I want to echo that, but I don't want to just have a conversation. I want action to come out of those conversations. I think I love the action. I love the conversation, but I don't want a bunch of lip action. I don't want to sit around and cackle like a bunch of hens. I want to actually get in the weeds and work together to find a way to solve these problems. I never ask anything of anybody that ever worked for me that I wasn't willing to do myself. I think we need to lead by example. Right. And I don't think we need just our patrolmen involved in this. Our patrolmen want to be leaders in the organization eventually. We need our administrators and leaders of that organization to get out in the weeds, and the people will follow. The officers will follow what they see. Just like we learn from our parents or from our influences, those young officers learn from their influences, which are the older officers. So they're going to follow examples. So we need to change our way of doing things to where we're out there teaching our young officers what to do, get involved in these communities, get to know people. You know, I never did it alone. I always had 3 or 4 guys I brought along with me. They weren't always the same guys, but I said, hey, this is what it takes. Get out here and get to know these people. Get involved in the community. And I don't care what your community is. I don't care if you're all white people. Get involved in your community, whatever community you're policing. Get involved in it. You should know me. How many times did I drive around? Did people know me and knew me by Lawhead? I mean, they all call me Lawhead. I mean, or call me Rich. I mean, I try to introduce myself as Rich in the community because I told people anybody can see I'm a cop, but if you pass me on the street and you call me Rich, that means you know me. That means you know me. You're not just officer such and such. Even when I was a captain, I used to tell people, yeah, you can see I'm a captain. You see the bars. Who cares? You know I'm a captain. You know the rank structure. But if you call me Rich, anybody else hears that, go, oh, I better be careful. He knows that guy. Yeah. You know, that, and not just by Lawhead because you're wearing a name tag, but you know my first name. You know me because I've been out there. And those are the kind of conversations we have to have. And those are the kind of things we need to do if we're ever going to change things.
Amen. And I want to have a few closing comments myself. I want to thank both of you for being here. I've been enlightened, and it's good to get to know you, our brother Terrence, and get to know you, Richard, or Rich, better. It's been a beautiful time to think and to process, and even some of my own biases to go away. I think that when it comes to the church, is the only solution to racism, the only solution to all of these problems that we're experiencing is Jesus. You and I came from similar backgrounds. You are very successful, CEO of Young Visionaries. You've come from a difficult place, but because of Jesus, you made it. And one of my goals for tonight is when young people of color do see us, that it wouldn't be that somehow that we're tokens of life, that somehow that they can't, that people of color cannot succeed even in the systems that are in place now. That I believe that with Jesus, all things are possible. That I grew up in a place called Encanto in San Diego. My mother was 15 when she had my brother, 16-ish when she had me. Alcoholic father, loose term. Very violent, drugs, gangs, fatherless homes. But because of Jesus, because of hope, anyone can get out. Anyone can make something of himself or herself. That it would be really easy for us to have excuses on why we can't succeed. But you're a great example that success is what you make it. That if you put your mind to it, that if you trust in the Lord, that success is out there to be had, that no matter who tries to stop you, that we can be successful. And my belief in Jesus, as I know that you men also believe in Jesus, will give us the strength to, I believe that if the church would leave these four walls and get into the community and show the love of Christ, I believe a great revival would happen. I believe that people would find hope. And the worst thing is for somebody to live without hope. Jesus gave us the great commandment. It says that we should go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe all things that I have commanded you. And behold, I am with you always, even until the end of the age. So the church has got some work to do inside and outside, and my hopes are, with the power of the Holy Spirit, that we would we'd get out there. We'd get out there and that we would do it. And if you're tuning in, watching our live stream, and maybe your heart's been a little full of hate, maybe you've come from a place where either you're black or you're a person of color, or maybe you're on the opposite end, and you just need hope. Some of the things that you're seeing on the news is causing you to be hopeless. I want to tell you that is Jesus. That's the answer. Jesus will replace all of that hate, all of that fear, and he'll pour himself into you, and you'll have peace and you'll have joy. And I just want to close our time out in prayer and give you an opportunity to give Jesus your life, to exchange any hate that you may have in your life. Where has that gotten you? But you give your life to Jesus Christ, and he will give you hope eternal, not just for this life, but the one to come. Heavenly Father, we thank you for our time together tonight, that we're able to just have a courageous conversation and talk about where we've been, our feelings, our emotions. We know that all racism is sin, and the church needs to call it for what it is more often, that it's sin. It's not a different ideology, that it's sin, that we were all made by you. We all come from Adam and Eve, so we're all related. So Jesus, we pray that you would bring a revival of your church, that we would see your creation as your creation, that you died to set us free, that you died for everybody. So help us to look and see the possibilities, that we would give our witness to those who don't know you, Jesus, because you value all life on the cross. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whomsoever would believe in him should not perish but have everlasting life. So if you want life in Jesus, the simple prayer is, Heavenly Father, forgive me of my sins. Jesus, I repent of my sins. I believe you died on a cross to set me free. Jesus, be my Lord and be my Savior. My life belongs to you. And for you, Christian, maybe your prayer is, Heavenly Father, give me the strength and the power to see past someone's color, that I might see your creation, someone that you have died for. So help me, Jesus, to have a courageous conversation this week with someone that's of a different color, a different nationality than myself. Give me the courage to have this conversation. We ask all of these things in Jesus' name. Amen. Amen. Thank you guys for tuning in online. I know we were a little long, but pray that it was enjoyable for you, and we're going to do this again real soon. So you go out and have a courageous conversation this week. God bless you.